Hey y'all, welcome to Where is My Hairbrush? I'm Eliza,
And I'm Gabrielle.
and we're here to talk about Veggie Tales.
That's right.
Today we are talking about episode 8, not counting the sing-along, of course. And this episode is Josh and the Big Wall. It was released in 1997, the year of my birth, and it follows the biblical story of Joshua. Gabrielle, what did you
Eliza.
remember about this episode?
Well, I remembered a lot, but first, did you remember the silly song?
I actually did, and I will tell you how and why.
Yay! Oh, okay. There's a reason. I'm ready.
One summer in my childhood years, the theme for VBS was VeggieTales. And one of the
What?
episodes, yes, I know, it was a
You
lot
had
of
a
fun.
VeggieTales VBS and we're just now finding out on episode 8?
Well, yes. I've been sitting on this one for a little
You've been
while.
holding out on us.
My mom was always in charge of planning VBS, and I was so into VeggieTales. She was like, probably other kids will like this a little bit too. Um,
That's awesome.
so we had one that was completely VeggieTales centric one year, and part of the night was spent watching an episode that went along with the Bible story that was going to be talked about.
Okay.
And Josh and the Big Wall was one of the episodes. And because I was helping mom plan it, in the way that
hmm
kids can help adults,
hmm
I watched this one a lot of times.
In preparation, of course,
Yes, of
for
course.
research.
And so the song of the Cebu, I knew it was coming, and I was so excited because it's so dumb, but it's so
It's
funny.
so silly. Oh my gosh. I love everything about this silly song. I got it wrong, and I guessed I love my lips, which was not correct.
Oh no, not I
But I
love
feel
my
like that one's
lips.
coming up,
It's
maybe.
soon.
It must be.
What are you
Actually, I think I
thinking?
remember which one it goes with for real, but I'm not going to say. 'Cause
Wow, that would be cheating, wouldn't it?
it would, exactly. Just a quick note about the Song of the Cebu. I noticed two things. One is that when Larry is presenting his multimedia event, he says Sabu, and then when they sing, they say Cebu, and that
Mhm.
confused me. And I had never noticed it before. And then the other thing was, I was like, is a Cebu real? I don't know the answer to this question. I assume it's not, but like I also thought water buffaloes weren't real, and they are real. So I looked it up, and Cebu is a region in the Philippines that has no mammals, so they're not real. So just to
That's
set
not
the record
true.
straight.
You're wrong.
What? I'm wrong. Tell me.
Apparently, it is typically spelled Zebu, Zebu,
Oh,
and
like the zebra-ish thing or
y-
whatever.
yes, or I mean, it starts with a Z, and zebra starts with a Z. And it
I
is
thought
like
they
a
had stripes.
humpbacked cow. They
Oh,
do not have
okay.
stripes.
Okay. I wasn't just
Um,
saying that because it started with a Z.
they are used as drought and riding animals.
Where? In where are they from?
That's a great question.
Africa? Australia?
I don't know. Let's find out. Where from?
Why did they spell it wrong?
Why spell? I don't know. They are from South Asia.
South Asia.
They are also known as humped cattle, and they are sometimes spelled with a C as well, but the
Oh.
original spelling is with a Z.
Okay. My research, which was less extensive than yours apparently, I just typed in Cebu and it came
Yes,
up with the Philippines.
yes,
So
that's what comes first.
okay.
The
I
cow
didn't
is not
scroll
as
past
important.
the Philippines. Well, because I was on Wikipedia and I was like, okay, but are there like mammals in the Philippines in this region? And no, there's only amphibians and reptiles. So then I was like, they made it up. I assumed incorrectly.
They did not make it up. I do, however, think that a multimedia presentation is a bit of a stretch for what Larry is doing at this time.
Well, so did Archibald. And he said as much.
It's more so like a show and
A
tell.
slideshow and a bed sheet.
It is exactly that. And just as Jerry wanted to get his money back, I think if I had paid for that experience, I too would want my money back. But I think if it was just one of my friends showing it to me and it was the same level of chaotic, I would think it was
I would
awesome.
love it.
So
Well,
fun.
have you ever played that game that's basically this, where like it's oh my gosh, what's that online game that you can play with people with all
Hmm.
like the word games? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Where you're drawing or
Yeah,
something.
it's
And
there's stuff like that, but there's one that's for a presentation and somebody else is controlling the slides and the person presenting doesn't know what's about to come on the screen, but they have to keep talking, and then everybody else like rates the presentation at the end.
that is hilarious. I
You
have
would
not
love
played
it.
this
I
one.
can't
I
believe
would
you've
love
never
to play
played it.
that.
It's
Oh my
so fun. Oh,
gosh.
it's a Jackbox game. I found the
Is
word
it?
in my head. Yeah, it's on one of the newer ones.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, you would
We'll have
love
to
it. We'll have to
play.
do that sometime.
Oh
Oh
my
my
gosh,
gosh,
that's
it's
so good.
so funny. And it reminded me of that. I was like, oh, it's like that one game that I played that one time.
It is a lot like that of
Yeah.
just random stuff popping up, and this is me with a buffalo.
I I have the entire dialogue to this whole silly song memorized, of course. And every time I listen to it, I'm like, it's just all parts of it are so funny and still so funny. Like if like you said, if this was happening to me in real life, I'd be cackling. I'd be like, this is hilarious. And I used to quote when Jimmy said, I want my money back. And then my favorite part is that Jerry's like, yeah, that wasn't very good.
I love that in the time like that this was created, they were singing along though. They were being good sports,
Yeah,
trying to buy
yeah,
into it because they had spent their money on this.
yeah.
Um, and I can imagine like if my mom had found herself in this situation, like she was on an excursion or something with a cruise, and she had paid money to be a part of a multimedia presentation, and they were like, "Please repeat after me."
She would be like, okay. I would too. I would too, but maybe it's because your mom and I are both music teachers. And so when someone says repeat after me, like there's no questions asked. I do it.
You just gotta do it. You just gotta
Yeah.
help them out. They're doing their
Mm-hmm.
best.
Mm-hmm. Because we know too well what it's like to say that and then nobody does.
Oh yeah.
It's a sad time.
And say it to a room full of children, and they're like, "Repeat after what?"
Yeah. And then I'll say repeat after me. And I'm like, okay, thanks, guys. Thanks
It's
so
very
much.
helpful. So helpful.
Wow,
So
what a good silly song.
it's a great one. It's a great one. Maybe not the best, but one of the
One
top
of the
three.
best. Yeah.
What did you remember about this episode, other than the silly song?
I remembered the Promised Land song and the
Mm-hmm.
Keep Walking song.
The Promised Land.
I love both of those so much. Um, all of the dialogue with the French peas, I remembered like all of it because it's so iconic.
It's so funny.
And then I remembered the Slurpees. Do they call it Slurpee or Slushy?
I think
Slurpee, I think.
I think they said Slurpee.
Okay, I wrote Slurpee, so I was correct. Slushy in real life. Anyway, I remember them because did you ever play the VeggieTales computer games that were on like VeggieTales.com or whatever?
I did not. I didn't even know of their existence.
Oh wow, they were great. It was in like you know when like every website had just a bunch of
Yes.
computer games. It was
Yes.
during that
Like
time, of
Pop
course.
Tropica.
Yes,
Remember Pop
yeah.
Tropica? Okay. All right.
Yes, vaguely.
Yes.
I was very homeschooled. I was only allowed to do certain things. And there was a game where the French peas were dumping Slurpees and you had to dodge them
That's
and
so
like
funny.
collect stuff. So I had that in my brain. And yeah, those were the main things. I didn't Oh, and I remember that Larry played Josh.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the main things I remembered. What about you?
I also remembered the Slurpees, but I didn't remember that they were called Slurpees, and I knew that they were purple too,
Mm-hmm.
specifically, because I had vivid memories of them getting like the purple gunk dropped on their heads. I didn't remember the Promised Land song. I only remembered the line of it that Pa Grape sing when he's like,
It's the best.
"In the land of milk and honey." He's like,
Sounds sticky.
he's just floating like randomly amongst milk and honey, like in like these old-timey-esque clay pots. I don't know.
It's giving the same vibes as Be Our Guest.
Yes, the music in general is, especially when you get to the French peas stuff, like
Yeah.
yeah, all the accordion, whatever.
Yes. Well, even just the floating among random utensils and
Mm,
stuff,
hmm.
like that's exactly what happens in
Yes,
Beauty and the Beast. So
yeah,
I thought that was
exactly.
funny.
Yeah, that's a great connection. Um, I also remembered the that Archibald was the
Oh, the
soldier of the
messenger.
Lord. Yes, that comes to Joshua or Larry
Uh-huh.
and tells him the news.
I had forgotten that whole scene, so I was very delighted at that.
I don't know why that scene stuck with me. I think I found it like very powerful and somewhat eerie as a kid.
I agree.
I thought it was kind of a little scurry, maybe. Like,
Yeah.
oh, this has a lot of weight. This is.
Well, and the way they animated him was so different that like they did kind of go for the angel thing where he was like kind of blurry and extra bright and
Mm-hmm,
like it
mm-hmm.
wasn't the same animation style. It was kind of cool. And they had Battle Hymn of the
Oh
Republic
my gosh, I was
in the
about to say
background.
that.
Yeah, I was like, "Whoa, that did not connect with me as a child."
I did not know. Yes, I did not remember that Battle Hymn of the Republic was being sung by an all men's chorus in the
Yeah,
background of the scene.
but it starts off so quiet and it gets
Yes.
and that whole scene is I mean word for word like from the Bible. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's probably
Mm-hmm.
why it feels so powerful because it has very powerful language compared to
Mm-hmm. It's
most of the dialogue.
very adult language too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I remembered that the Israelites, some of them wanted to go back to Egypt because I always thought that was dumb. I was like, oh, but wouldn't that be really bad? So-
We were in slavery. That was a contender for my favorite quote because the way he said it was like exactly how I feel whenever I read the Old Testament
Oh my
parts where they're
gosh.
like, I miss the meat, I miss the, and it's like, you were enslaved. It was so perfect.
Yeah, it's super relevant. It's like um it's such a quippy response to it, and it
Mm-hmm.
quickly sort of takes away some of the tension that would come along with this being real, but also being like a little bit goofy, so it
Mm-hmm.
sticks in the memory. I also remembered that when they bust out the trumpets for the seventh day, that they played.
When the Saints,
No,
yeah,
no,
when the Saints go marching in. Yes, it was.
I thought it was Joshua Fit the Battle of
It
Jericho.
wasn't because when they got them out, I was like, oh, I bet they're about to play Joshua Fit the Battle of Jericho, but it was when the Saints go marching in.
I also was singing it in my head, and it was "When the Saints," and for some reason, my brain was still saying, "This is Joshua for the Battle of
They're
Jericho."
very similar songs.
Um,
It's both very New Orleans.
yeah. Anyway, okay. I guess I vaguely remembered
But you
what they
remember
played.
that they played the trumpets and there was
Yeah, I knew
jazz.
that, and also that they looked way different from your average VeggieTales character,
Yes.
um, which I thought was really interesting and an odd detail to add in, but
Yeah.
fun all the
Also, where
same.
were they the rest of the time they were
Yeah,
marching?
exactly.
That was my question.
Yeah,
Like you guys only showed up after like the
they're
seventh day of marching all day.
they were
That's a
just
little bit
hiding.
lazy. Sorry.
They were catching a nap. They didn't want to get slurpeed.
Right? Sorry, can't get Slurpee in our horns. That's what a horn
Oh
player would
my
say.
gosh.
Am I right?
Yeah, well, it's more so like an oboist would be like, "Oh, it's a little too hot out here,"
Sorry, my
or
reed, my
"Oh,
reed.
yeah, it's my instrumental crack." I'm sorry,
Yeah.
guys.
It's exactly what oboists say.
Oh my gosh. Do you, Gabrielle, have a
Hmm.
favorite quote from this episode?
Yes. When the Israelites approach the wall of Jericho for the first time, the French peas look down and Joshua like gives his big introduction, like we're gonna take your land. And the French peas say, It was nice to meet you. Now go away.
Oh my gosh. The French peas make this episode.
They're
They're so
so
funny.
funny.
Oh my gosh.
I really wonder, was it one person voicing all of them? I think it was.
I think it was two people.
Because it feels like it was two people, but
I would
did
have
they
to look
really
it
have
up.
two people that good at a French accent?
I mean,
Maybe. I guess it's not that hard
yeah,
to
they do
do.
all kinds of like voice acting in that way.
It's true, but it's just so good. The reason I think it was one person though is because during the Keep Walking song, it really sounds like they just recorded the same thing and
Same person
looped it
over.
over.
But I
Yeah.
think they recorded the same two people over and over again
Okay,
because
maybe.
it
You could
sounds
be
like a
right.
duet to me at the
Okay.
start.
Hmm.
But again, I could have that wrong. But that's what I think.
They're
Um,
so funny. Everything they say is hilarious.
they also said my favorite quote, which is,
Okay.
"You are not such a big deal, just a tiny gherkin," because they're
When did they say that? I don't remember that at all.
they okay.
I
So
just watched it. I didn't catch it.
it was in the same moment that they were picking on Larry when he came up and he was like, "We're going to take your
Oh,
city."
okay.
And they were like, "We have a wall and you do not." This seems
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
impossible. Um, and they were making fun of Larry, calling him a pickle and stuff. Like,
Oh yeah.
"Little pickle, you cannot take our wall. It's too big and you are way down there and we're way up here. Instead, we'll dump this Slurpee on your head." Um, and like Larry keeps saying, "I'm not a pickle.
I'm a
I'm a
cucumber.
cucumber." And at one point, they look at him and they say, "You are not such a big deal, just a tiny gherkin, little pickle."
That's so funny.
It's so stupid. It
Oh
was
my
really
gosh.
funny. Oh
My
man.
my second favorite quote was at the very end. Um, Jimmy, I think, says, "Boy, did I pick a lousy day to wear my contacts."
It was so dusty because
Because
the
there's so
walls
much
just
dust.
crumbled. Yeah,
Like that goes over every like no 6-year-old wears contacts, but that was
right.
really funny. I was like, that's
Yeah.
a good joke.
I also liked when was it Jerry or was it the pea that's with or the grape that's with Pa Grape that leans over and says, "How are we clapping?"
Yeah, that
Like
was. Is his name Percy? Am I
you might
making that up?
I think you have
No,
it
no,
right.
that's Laura's.
Yeah, you're right. That's Laura's little
Okay.
brother.
Yeah, I don't. He has a name because he's in the first episode,
I don't remember his
right? With
name.
the grapes of wrath. I don't remember either. Anyway,
But
yes, yes.
the moment like Larry's just saying this beautiful song about how we should listen to God because he's faithful, blah 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 blah. And everyone, like motivational, they start clapping
Yes.
at his song. And one of the grapes leans over and says, "How are we clapping?"
That's
Because
so funny
they don't
because
have any
they're
hands.
vegetables.
I also, along the same line of like physical
Mm-hmm.
comedy,
Mm-hmm.
whenever whenever the angel of the Lord presents himself to Joshua,
Mm-hmm.
and he was meant like he went
Oh,
onto his face in a sign
that
of
was
respect, he literally just flopped over. It was like,
okay. I'm glad you brought that scene up. And then, because like then Larry says something, but he's talking in the sand, so the
yes,
angel's like, "What? Like, what did you say?" And then he picks his head up and says something kind of profound because that's the part where they're quoting the Bible. And he's
yes,
like, "Oh, really? That's what you said? Are you sure?" Literally this morning, my husband, as we were getting up, had his face flat into his pillow and was speaking to me. And I was like, "What? What are you saying?" I had the same moment this morning, and I was like, "That's funny."
did he lift his
That
head
just
up and say
happened to
something
me.
profound?
No, he kept saying it into his pillow, and it wasn't very profound. So
Yeah,
sorry, Craig.
fair enough, fair enough. Oh my gosh. Um,
Oh, okay, wait, I have one more quote. The
yeah,
French
yeah,
piece just had too many things. The one I wrote down before watching it was a quote from Keep Walking. And the French piece said, "The awesome power of this wall is clearly demonstrated. But out here in the hot, hot sun, perhaps you're dehydrated."
yeah.
And I've always loved the rhyming scheme. I feel like it's so witty and clever, but also a great use of dehydrated.
If I could rhyme on command well, like using complex rhymes like you just did,
Yeah.
I'd be unstoppable.
Yeah, you would.
I would also be intolerable. Like
It
no one
would.
would.
It'd be so obnoxious. You do it all the time.
Literally all the time. Oh my gosh. It's a good thing I have a buffering speed, like
You totally do that though. Sometimes you do sit on a joke and then you say it after the fact.
yeah.
If you could do it on command, you would never stop. That'd be
It's
so
true.
funny.
It's true. If I were like as quick-witted as I would like to be, I'd be a pest. I'd be a menace to society.
That's so funny.
It's probably better this way.
Or you could just practice rhyming everything all the time. I bet you'd get better at it.
Practice it in my head all the time until I get really proficient, and then just start doing it out loud. And people
Just
are gonna be
one
like,
day.
No. I'm gonna enter a room and people are just gonna like leave it.
Practice on Morty. Practice on the dog.
Oh, that's a good idea. He can't ditch me. He'll just be
still
glad
love
that someone's showing him attention.
Yeah.
Oh. One of my favorite things about this episode is that the whole thing is sort of like a play that you would do in church. Do you know what I mean? Like you got Bob and Junior Asparagus
narrating
the whole thing, and occasionally like interjecting with something profound or like helpful. And the rest of the time you have these characters just carrying out everything they've just said they would do.
Right.
And like with like little quippy lines sometimes and whatever. And it reminds me of literally any of the plays or sketches that we did in church growing up. Like especially for Easter. We used to always do something like that for Easter, I think. And like well, Christmas too. Like I guess they happened at the big liturgical
big holidays, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Happy Easter, by the way.
Yeah, same to you. Happy Easter.
I haven't talked to you since Easter, 5 days ago.
Very sweet.
When I was looking up which episode we were doing this week, it said that this one was meant to be a spoof on Monty Python. And I'm confused about that. I don't know, but maybe, I haven't watched a lot of Monty Python. So maybe I'm just kind of not aware enough to know. Did you feel that way at all?
The only one I've watched is Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And I've seen it a few times, but I would never have made that connection. So maybe it was a different movie in the series that they were trying to get at. Or maybe it's a very specific scene that's just not coming to mind.
Or maybe it's just the style of humor. Because there is a lot of that, like, breaking the fourth wall stuff, like you talked about, like the how we were in slavery, stuff like that. And it's like, that's the only thing I could think of, was just being like really on the nose about things.
I mean, it also comes across like a low rate film. Like when the wall comes down in Jericho, there's literally nothing but sand inside. Like it's not like they're walking into this bodacious, beautiful promised land. They're just walking into more sand.
Right. That's true. That's so true.
And like the tent camp only has 7 or 8 Israelites in it.
I wanted to talk about that too. I think I counted because it struck me how few there were. There were 14 when they marched, because there's the 4 little peas under the ark. And I think that really misled me as a child. I think that I thought there were maybe only a handful of Israelites. I looked, I like backed up in Joshua to see how many people actually walked around Jericho, and it was 40,000 soldiers.
That's hilarious.
So I was like, you could have just copy pasted, right? Surely, like just a couple more peas or something. I don't know.
It's always the peas. They're the extras. But no, like that's part of what comes across like the low rate film. Like you don't have a ton of money for extras, so you're just using a smaller cast or whatever. So I don't know. I guess I can see the connection, but it wouldn't have come to me.
Spoof seems like a strong word.
Yeah. In general, this episode sort of follows the format of the story, but by story I mean the Bible verses from Joshua chapter 5 verses 13 through chapter 6 verse 27. but with some interjections as well. So we
Mm-hmm.
start at the beginning, right? And we're setting up the scene. Bob's like laying it out. The Israelites are in the desert because they have escaped slavery, being led by Moses, but then they were scared to go into the promised land, so they wandered the desert for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
Some other things happened in there too, but that was the general setup for this story. And then we get started on the story of Joshua,
Mm-hmm.
um, bringing them to this promised land, encountering.
Because Moses has died during the 40
Yes,
years of them being barred from the promised land. So Joshua
right,
was his assistant, and now he's in charge.
exactly. And they've come to Jericho, and Jericho has this massive wall around it. Probably a marvel of the time period
Yeah.
that they look at, and they're like, "Oh, how are we gonna like, like scale that thing?
Right,
What
right,
we
right.
what are we gonna do? The promised land's back there, and we're supposed to be owning it."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so Joshua goes off to a quiet place to pray, and the warrior of the Lord, the angel, comes to him and tells him this marching plan to march around the city for 7 days, and on the seventh day, play trumpets, and then everyone yell really loudly, and the
Mm-hmm.
walls will come tumbling down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then this story carries itself out. It pretty much what the angel told them to do, then the Israelites immediately go and do it for the next 7 days in the Bible. Now, in this episode, they
Mm-hmm.
showed more of the spirit of the Israelites as
Questioning.
per what existed while they were in the desert,
Right.
to sort of include stuff that was outside of this actual section of scripture, which we know to be true based on
Right.
other
How they
scriptures.
acted all the time.
Yes.
Even
But not.
immediately after this, sorry, I was reading like past chapter 6, and one of the things when they are successful in conquering Jericho, the Lord tells them, don't take any devoted items, so no idols, don't take any
Mm-hmm,
idols with you,
mm-hmm,
because we've had this idolatry issue, don't touch any of their idols.
mm-hmm.
And they took all the idols, and then they started worshiping them, and so it's like, immediately we don't listen.
Yeah.
So I agree, it's totally in the spirit, and I thought that was a good thing to
Mm-hmm.
add.
And it showed both ends of it too. And we heard people, or we read about people doubting from both ends throughout Exodus and throughout like the early chapters of Joshua as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like you had people that would doubt and be like, "We should just go back to Egypt. At least we had food, and
Mm-hmm.
like
And
we're not in
meat.
the desert." You know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and then God provides them with food. He provides them with manna,
Mm-hmm.
and they start to get tired of it. And they're like, "Oh, we should have gone back to Egypt where there was
Mm-hmm.
meat and options
Which
or
was in the
whatever."
song, right? The line,
Yes,
a dish which is filling but bland.
yes. And
Okay.
then you also had people that were like, "We just need to take matters into our own hands," kind of like Jimmy and Jerry, where they're building their rocket thing to take down the wall
Right.
that looks
Right.
haphazardly made.
Yeah.
But they were like, "Oh, we should just, do this or this and not follow what God has set out
Yeah, kind
before
of like
us."
Aaron building the statue, the golden
Mm-hmm.
calf and stuff like that. Like people just doing
Mm-hmm.
whatever they want instead of following God's plan.
Exactly. And so the VeggieTales episode incorporated some of that so
Mm-hmm.
that we could see a more wide
Get the
scoping.
context. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a better full image of the Israelites. And it goes further into answering the question, because in VeggieTales there's always a question at the beginning of the episode.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the question for this episode was, how do I follow God even though it's hard, like him telling me to
Mm-hmm.
love someone who isn't kind to me? You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, and this episode shows us that even though we may think of a million ideas a minute, or
Mm-hmm.
we may romanticize the opportunities that we had in the past or whatever, God's way is always the better way.
Mm-hmm.
And God's way, like in this specific story, seems so silly. Like,
Yep.
if God told me this giant wall, no worries. Don't stress about it. We're going to walk around it. We're gonna
Right.
blow some trumpets and it's just gonna
It's gonna
crumble. It's
fall
gonna be
down.
aight. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'd have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
Because that's just
That's
usually not how the
ridiculous.
world works. It's
Yeah.
just it's very silly in a way.
Mhm.
But God's way is not always like the
It doesn't
most
make sense all the time.
scientific. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
was actually just reading a book that talked exactly about that, like about the mystery of God and how we just cannot understand God. That's why he's God and we are not.
hmm
Um, but in like the plans that he has are so much farther reaching than what we can comprehend. And the book was talking about Joseph, not to get too sidetracked, but
hmm
like, when Joseph was sold into slavery as a teenager by his own family, I
hmm
mean, that how can that seem like God's plan? But it was. And because Joseph was faithful, the plan, worked and two nations were saved. So it's like our plan does usually makes more sense to us, but then when we can look at it in retrospect, we're like, oh, yeah, no, God's plan was definitely better than ours. Like that worked.
And sometimes it's just like missing the forest for the trees, which is really easy to do on our little
Mm-hmm.
ground level in our specific moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just that God doesn't need to follow the rules of the world. Like he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
need to follow gravity, for example, or like
Mm-hmm.
he made the world so he is outside of it and can do crazy things like turn entire rivers into blood. Like he,
Right.
and
Or part the sea for the Israelites to walk through, which happened two
yes,
chapters before this, by the way, the second
or
time.
literally make bread fall from the sky. Like
Yeah.
he
It
had,
is a little, I mean, okay. You and I, if we were told to walk around a city and it's gonna fall down, I feel like we'd be like, yeah, no, like how? But there has been miracle after miracle in this desert, you know? I feel like they should have had maybe a little more faith. But I think about that, but would I actually have had more faith even if I had seen these sorts of miracles happen? I don't know.
I think it's way easier to doubt. Also, the Bible happens like you read it and 40 years happens like that, you
That's
know?
true. That's very true.
Um, and we know from experience that 40 years doesn't just happen in the snap of a fingers. Like it
Mm-hmm.
takes time and we are so forgetful.
That's so true.
Especially if you're a people that doesn't know how to read or write because you've been enslaved for however many
Mm-hmm.
years. Like it's not like you can write down in your diary, like, dear diary,
Right.
today God did some crazy stuff. He turned this river into blood, and then like
Right.
you can't go
Right.
back and read that. Like you're just relying on your memory,
The
which is
oral stories, yeah.
yeah, and that stuff is
So true.
pretty fleeting, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Uh,
can be. It can be unless we talk about it and remind
yeah,
ourselves of it.
exactly.
Yeah, of all the times God has been faithful. That's a great point, Eliza.
Faithful and miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, it's otherworldly, you know.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that I've seen some like documentaries on like National Geographic or the History Channel, whatever, and they're like the miracles in the Bible explained. But I was very skeptical when I saw these, but then I thought about it. I was like, huh, do you think that God caused an earthquake to happen and the earthquake is what tore the city down? Or do you just think that God like punched it?
I've asked myself this question before, ever since I was like old enough to ask questions, I guess, or to like
Uh-huh.
read stuff and have questions naturally come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I've thought about like, what if, it's probably made of brick.
Mm-hmm.
What if the mortar that was used for the brick was really loose and sheer vibration of
Mm.
like
Some really
200
good
trumpet
horn players.
players?
Yeah.
Yeah, like what if that really was enough to make the
And everyone's
foundation?
shouting. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm not a scientist and I did not look up how much sound it would take to cause that sort of damage. My gut tells me probably more than they were putting out even as 40,000 people. But
maybe not, though.
I don't
That's a
know.
lot of people.
And the mortar was probably literally just dirt and water. Like, it
Right.
wasn't anything crazy like what we use today to create stadiums where people
Hmm.
scream out Taylor Swift lyrics all in unison. Um,
But that being said, I think about all of the ancient monuments that have stood for like 4,000
true,
years, and they're still
true.
there, and they didn't have very fancy building equipment.
That's true. However, the construction of a pyramid is quite different from that of a wall, like in terms of like
Yeah,
I
but like the Colosseum's super old, and
that's true.
that's mostly still there. It's a little
I'm
bit
not an
there.
archaeologist. I don't know these
I'm
things.
not either.
What I do know is that I have asked the questions of like maybe it was possible that that much sound made it crumble, or
Yeah.
like there was an earthquake or whatever or whatever. However, I think it's better for my faith as
Hmm.
like a growing opportunity if I don't really worry about that.
Hmm. And it
Instead,
also doesn't matter,
yeah.
is the cool part. Like any of those options could be the right one. Like maybe they really did tear it down with their sound or whatever. But it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter because God told him to do it and then it happened.
Mm-hmm. And
I
that's
just think that's
huge.
so cool. So yeah, that's incredible.
Well, guys, this one has been a doozy. One of our faves, and we were super happy to share it with you. Thanks for joining us. If you would like, you can contact us at whereismyhairbrushpodcast at gmail.com. And until next time, remember,
God made you special.
and He loves you very much. Bye!
Bye.